The building fell on a Tuesday morning. Jack Morrison was drinking his coffee when he heard the sound. It was not like thunder or an explosion. It was more like a long, tired sigh. He turned toward the window of his small office and watched the tall residential tower in the distance fold in on itself. Floor after floor dropped into the one below it. The whole thing took about 12 seconds. His coffee cup slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. The tower had been home to 300 human colonists. It was built by the Valanthi, the alien species that had invited humanity to join the galactic community 2 years ago. The Valanthi were master builders. Their structures stood for thousands of years on 100 different worlds. They had never lost a building, not once in their entire history, until today. Jack ran outside and joined the crowd rushing toward the disaster site. Dust filled the air. People were screaming. Emergency vehicles from both human and Valanthi teams arrived within minutes. By some miracle, the building had been mostly empty when it fell. A fire drill had been scheduled that morning, and most residents were outside. Only 11 people were injured. No one died. But the Valanthi were horrified in a way that went beyond the physical damage. Chief Architect Vorath arrived within the hour. He was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and 4 arms that moved constantly when he was upset. Right now, all 4 arms were pressed against his chest, a sign of deep distress in his species. "This is not possible," Vorath said. He stood at the edge of the rubble and stared at the remains of his creation. "I designed this structure myself. The materials were tested. The calculations were perfect. This building should have stood for 10,000 years. Jack approached him carefully. He had worked with Valanthi engineers before. They were proud of their work. And they had every right to be. Their technology was centuries ahead of anything humans had ever built. "I am the lead human engineer on this colony," Jack said. "My name is Jack Morrison. I want to help you find out what happened." Vorath turned his large black eyes toward Jack. There was no anger in them, only confusion. "Your people have been living in this structure for 180 days. 180 days. Do you understand how short that is? Some of our buildings have stood since before your species learned to make fire." "I understand," Jack said. "That is why we need to investigate together." Over the next few days, teams from both species examined every piece of rubble. Amy Chen Williams, the colony's structural analyst, worked around the clock. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a mind that never stopped working. She found something strange on the 3rd day. "The collapse started from the inside," she told Jack. "There were microfractures throughout the support beams, tiny cracks, smaller than a human hair. But there were millions of them. They spread through the building like a disease." "What caused them?" Jack asked. Amy shook her head. "That is what I cannot figure out. There was no earthquake, no explosion, no external force. The building just wore out. But that should take centuries, not months." Ben Torres, the construction foreman, had been walking through the rubble with them. He was an older man with rough hands and a face that had seen decades of hard work. He picked up a piece of twisted metal and turned it over in his fingers. "Looks like metal fatigue," he said quietly. "But that does not make sense. That takes years to happen. Not weeks." No one paid much attention to his comment. They were too focused on the Valanthi diagnostic equipment that was scanning every piece of debris. Meanwhile, Claire Dawson was dealing with a different kind of problem. She was the colonial administrator, the person responsible for keeping peace between humans and their alien hosts. And right now, peace was becoming difficult. "Some of the Valanthi counselors are asking questions," she told Jack that evening. "They want to know if humans did something to cause this. They are not accusing us directly. Not yet. But I can hear it in their voices. They think we broke their building on purpose." Jack rubbed his tired eyes. "Why would we destroy our own homes? They do not understand us," Claire said. "They have never met a species like humanity before. We are loud. We are messy. We move around constantly. To them, we probably seem chaotic and unpredictable." A week later, Amy called an emergency meeting. Her face was pale. "I found something," she said. 2 other buildings in the colony are showing the same pattern. Microfractures in the support structures. They are not as bad as the tower that fell, but they are getting worse every day. The room went silent. How long do we have? Jack asked. At the current rate of damage, maybe 6 months before the next collapse, maybe less. Vorath stood in the corner of the room, all 4 arms wrapped tightly around his body. He had spent his entire career building structures that lasted forever. Now his buildings were falling apart. And he did not know why. I have examined every calculation, he said. His voice was barely above a whisper. I have tested every material. There is nothing wrong with my design. Nothing. Jack looked at the alien architect and felt a strange sympathy. Vorath was not arrogant. He was genuinely confused. Something was happening that his entire civilization had never encountered before. And unless they figured out what it was, more buildings would fall, more people would be hurt, and humanity's place in the galactic community might be destroyed along with them. Jack took a deep breath. Then, we need to look at something your people have never considered before. We need to look at us. At humans. At what makes us different. Vorath's black eyes met his. Different how? I do not know yet, Jack admitted. But I intend to find out. 3 weeks after the first building collapsed, Vorath stood before the Galactic Council. The chamber was enormous, filled with representatives from dozens of alien species. All of them were watching him with curiosity and concern. I have completed my investigation, Vorath said. His voice echoed through the vast room. The structures are failing due to accumulated microdamage. The rate of this damage is 47,000% faster than any species has ever caused in recorded galactic history. A murmur spread through the council chamber. Are you saying the humans are destroying the buildings? Asked Councillor Sarath. He was another Valanthi, older than Vorath, with darker blue skin and a reputation for being suspicious of new species. Vorath hesitated. I am saying that something about human presence is causing damage that we have never seen before. I cannot explain how or why. Sarath leaned forward. Perhaps the explanation is simple. Perhaps humans are too dangerous for galactic society. Back on Keller 7, Jack heard about the council meeting from Claire. She looked worried. Sarath is pushing for restrictions on human movement, she said. He wants to limit where we can go, what buildings we can use. Some counselors are even talking about quarantine. Jack felt his stomach tighten. We did not do anything wrong. We are just living our lives. I know that, but they are scared. Their perfect buildings are falling apart, and they do not understand why. Fear makes people do foolish things. While the politicians argued, Amy continued her research. She had set up sensors throughout the colony, recording every vibration, every sound, every movement. She spent long nights staring at data on her screen, looking for patterns. One evening, Sam Reeves knocked on her door. He was a young maintenance technician, barely 23 years old. With an easy smile and a curious mind. I brought you dinner, he said, holding up a container of food. You have not eaten in 12 hours. Amy smiled tiredly. Thank you, Sam. Come in. Sam sat down across from her and looked at the screens filled with data. Any progress? Maybe, Amy said slowly. I am seeing something strange. The areas with the most damage are not random. They follow specific patterns. What kind of patterns? Amy pulled up a map of the colony. Red zones marked the areas of highest structural damage. Look at this. The gym. The running track. The playground. The community center where people dance on weekends. These areas have 10 times more damage than the quiet zones like the library or the meditation rooms. ADR, Sam frowned. But those are just places where people exercise and have fun. Exactly, Amy said. And I think that might be the answer. The next day, a young Valanthi engineer named Tilani was assigned to assist with the investigation. She was smaller than most of her species, with curious silver eyes and a habit of asking questions that her superiors found annoying. Tilani had requested the assignment herself. She wanted to understand humans. She had seen them from a distance, watched them walk and talk and laugh. They fascinated her in a way she could not explain. Sam was assigned to show her around the colony. He took her to the residential areas first, pointing out the different buildings and explaining how humans lived. "This is the recreation center," Sam said as they approached a large building with wide windows. "People come here to exercise, play sports, and spend time with friends." Tilani looked through the windows and froze. Inside, human children were playing. They were running at full speed across the floor. They jumped over obstacles. They wrestled with each other, fell down, got back up, and did it all again. Two boys were throwing a ball back and forth with tremendous force. A girl was doing flips on a padded mat. "What are they doing?" Tilani whispered. Her voice was filled with horror. Sam looked confused. "They are playing. This is normal for human children. Normal." Tilani stepped back from the window. "They are attacking each other. They are throwing themselves at the ground. They are..." She could not find the words. In her entire life, she had never seen any species treat their own bodies with such violence. Valanthi children sat quietly. They played gentle games that involved careful movements and soft touches. They would never dream of running at full speed or jumping off high surfaces. "They are hurting themselves," she said. Sam laughed gently. "No. They are having fun. Human children do this every day. It is how we grow strong." Tilani watched the children for a long time. She saw them fall and get up again. She saw them crash into each other and laugh about it. She saw them jump from heights that would terrify any Valanthi child. And suddenly, she began to understand something that Vorath had missed. "How much do your people move?" she asked Sam. "In a normal day, how much do humans move their bodies?" Sam thought about it. "I do not know. A lot, I guess. We walk around. We exercise. We fidget when we are bored. We pace when we are thinking. I have never really counted. Valanthi do not move unless we have a reason to," Tilani said quietly. "We sit still for hours at a time. We only walk when we need to go somewhere. The thought of running for fun or jumping for pleasure is strange to us." She looked back at the children, still running and jumping and falling. "Your people never stop moving," she said. "Even when you are standing still, you shift your weight. You tap your feet. You move your hands. You are constantly in motion." Sam shrugged. "I guess we are. I never thought about it as something unusual." But Tilani was already thinking about the data. The damaged zones. The gym. The playground. The dance hall. All places where humans moved the most. Maybe the buildings were not broken. Maybe they were being worn out by a species that could not stand still. Jack called a meeting in the main conference room. Human engineers sat on one side of the table. Valanthi architects sat on the other. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Vorath looked tired. His forearms hung limply at his sides, and his black eyes had lost their usual shine. The investigation had taken everything out of him: his reputation, his confidence, his understanding of the universe he thought he knew. "Thank you all for coming," Jack said. He stood at the head of the table, looking at both groups. "I want to ask a simple question, and I need honest answers from both sides." He turned to Vorath. "How much does an average Valanthi move in a single day?" "Some of the very T's. $2.7. $2.7. Vorath looked confused. "Move? What do you mean?" "Walking, standing, sitting, moving from place to place." "How much physical activity does a normal Valanthi do in 24 hours? Vorath thought about it. "We move when necessary. Perhaps we walk from our sleeping quarters to our workstations. We sit for our meals. We return home. On an average day, perhaps 2,000 steps, maybe less." Jack nodded. He had expected something like that. He had been watching the Valanthi for weeks now. They were still creatures. They did not fidget. They did not pace. When they sat down, they stayed perfectly motionless until they had a reason to move. "Now let me tell you about humans," Jack said. He pulled up data on the screen behind him. The average human takes between 8,000 and 12,000 steps per day. Some of us take much more. But that is not the whole story. He pointed to the screen. Humans do not just walk. We move constantly. Even when we are not going anywhere. We shift our weight when we stand. We tap our feet when we sit. We pace when we think. We stretch when we wake up. We fidget during long meetings. Ben Torres spoke up from his seat. My grandson is 6 years old. That boy does not stop moving from sunrise to sunset. Running, jumping, climbing, falling, getting back up. If I tried to keep up with him for one day, I would need a week to recover. A few humans laughed. The Volanthi looked even more confused. I do not understand, Vorath said. Why would you move when you do not need to? Amy stood up and joined Jack at the front of the room. That is what we needed to figure out, and I think we finally have an answer. She pulled up a map of the colony showing structural damage. The red zones were exactly where she had predicted. The gym, the playground, the recreation center, the hallways between apartments. Every time a human takes a step, they create vibration, Amy explained. It is very small. So small that your instruments might not even notice it. But humans take millions of steps. And we do not just walk. We run. We jump. We dance. We play sports where we throw ourselves at the ground and each other. She pointed to the data. Your buildings were designed for species that sit still. The materials can handle occasional movement, but they cannot handle constant, relentless vibration from a species that never stops moving. Vorath stared at the screen. His forearms slowly rose to his chest in the Volanthi gesture of shock. You are saying that your people destroyed my buildings simply by living in them? Yes, Jack said. Not on purpose. Not through any fault of design. Your buildings are perfect for any species in the galaxy. Any species except us. The room fell silent. Tilani, the young Volanthi engineer, spoke up hesitantly. I watched human children playing yesterday. They throw their bodies around as if pain does not exist. They fall down and laugh about it. I have never seen anything like it. That is just how we are, Sam said with a shrug. We have been that way forever. But why? Tilani asked. Why do humans move so much? It was Ben Torres who answered. The old construction foreman had been listening quietly, turning thoughts over in his mind like he turned tools in his hands. Because standing still gets you killed, he said. Everyone looked at him. I grew up in California, Ben continued. We had earthquakes there. Not every day, but often enough that you learn to be ready. When the ground starts shaking, you do not freeze. You move. You get under something solid. You get outside. You act. He stood up slowly. My grandmother used to tell stories about hurricanes in Florida. My grandfather survived a volcano in the Philippines. My other grandmother lived through flooding in Texas. Human history is full of disasters. Earth is not a gentle world. It shakes, it burns, it floods, it freezes. And the humans who survived were the ones who kept moving. Jack picked up where Ben left off. Human buildings on Earth are designed differently than yours. We use flexible joints. We add shock absorbers. We build with the assumption that the ground might shake at any moment, because on Earth, it often does. We call it dynamic loading, Amy added. The idea that a structure must handle constant movement, not just occasional stress. Every bridge, every building, every road on Earth is built with this in mind. Because we know that nothing on our planet ever stays perfectly still. Vorath sat back in his chair. For a long moment, he did not speak. We build for eternity, he finally said. We build for worlds that do not move, for species that do not move, for a future that is calm and unchanging. He looked at Jack with something new in his eyes. It might have been respect. You build for chaos. For a world that is always trying to kill you. We had no choice, Jack said simply. It was adapt or die. And humans have always chosen to adapt. Vorath stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at the colony, at the humans walking through the streets below. For the first time, he noticed how they moved. Quick steps, swinging arms, children running ahead of their parents, a woman jogging along the path, a man stretching his legs while he waited for a friend. "You never stop," Vorath whispered. "Even now, standing at a window, you are moving, your feet shift, your weight changes. You breathe deeper than any species I have ever seen." He turned back to the room. "I finally understand what makes humans different," he said. "You are not destructive. You are alive in a way that no other species in the galaxy has ever been alive, and my buildings were never designed for that much life." Tilani stood before the Galactic Council. She was young for such an important moment, and her silver eyes moved nervously across the assembled representatives. But her voice was steady when she began to speak. "I have spent the past month studying humans," she said. "Not just their buildings, their history, their planet, their evolution. And what I found has changed everything I thought I knew about life in the galaxy." She activated the display behind her. A blue and green planet appeared, spinning slowly in the darkness of space. "This is Earth, the human homeworld. By galactic standards, it is a nightmare." The display changed to show geological data. Red zones covered the entire planet. Earth has active tectonic plates that shift constantly. This causes earthquakes that can destroy entire cities in seconds. The planet has thousands of active volcanoes. The climate swings between ice ages and heat waves. The weather systems produce storms so powerful that they can tear buildings from the ground. Murmurs spread through the council chamber. "Most civilizations in the galaxy arose on stable worlds," Tilani continued. "Planets with calm geology, predictable weather, and gentle conditions. That is why most species are sedentary. Stillness was never punished. Movement was never rewarded." She looked directly at Counselor Sereth, who had been the loudest voice calling for human restrictions. Humans evolved on a world where the ground could shake at any moment, where rivers could flood without warning, where fire could fall from the sky. On Earth, standing still meant death. The humans who survived were the ones who kept moving, kept watching, kept ready to run at the first sign of danger. The display showed human evolutionary history. Early humans running across savannas. Humans fleeing from predators. Humans surviving floods and earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. This constant movement became written into their bodies, Tilani said. "Humans have the highest endurance of any species we have studied. They can run for hours without stopping. They can walk for days. They heal faster than almost any known creature, because their bodies expect to be damaged and have adapted to recover quickly." She paused and let the council absorb this information. What we saw as destruction was actually survival. The human restlessness that broke our buildings is the same restlessness that allowed their species to survive on a planet that wanted to kill them. Vorath watched from the side of the chamber. He had asked Tilani to give this presentation because she understood humans in a way he was only beginning to grasp. Her youth was an advantage here. She had no reputation to protect, no assumptions to defend. Counselor Sereth stood up. "This is interesting history, but it does not change the facts. Human presence damages our structures. They are incompatible with galactic society." "With respect, Counselor," Tilani replied, "I believe the opposite is true. Humans are not incompatible. They are simply different. And that difference might be exactly what the galaxy needs." She changed the display again. This time it showed galactic expansion over the past 10,000 years. Our civilization has spread to thousands of worlds, but we have avoided difficult planets, worlds with unstable geology, worlds with dangerous weather, worlds where survival requires constant adaptation. We left those worlds empty because we did not know how to live there. She highlighted dozens of red zones across the galaxy map. Humans know how to live there. They have been doing it for their entire existence. They do not fear unstable ground. They build for it. They do not avoid difficult conditions. They adapt to them. Claire Dawson smiled from her seat in the observation gallery. The young Valanthe was making the argument better than any human diplomat could have. Instead of restricting humans, Tilani concluded, we should be learning from them. They solved problems we never had to face. They developed technologies we never needed. They built a civilization on a world that should have been impossible. She turned off the display and faced the council directly. Human restlessness is not a flaw. It is an adaptation. And it might be the most remarkable adaptation any species in the galaxy has ever developed. The council chamber fell silent. Representatives from dozens of species exchanged glances. Some looked thoughtful, others looked uncertain. A few, like Sereth, still looked suspicious. But the mood in the room had shifted. After the session ended, Vorath found Tilani in the hallway. She looked exhausted but satisfied. You did well, he told her. Better than I could have done. I only told the truth, she said. Once I understood why humans move the way they do, everything else made sense. Vorath nodded slowly. I spent my whole career building for stillness. For permanence. For a universe that does not change. The humans have shown me that there is another way to build. Perhaps a better way. What will you do now? Tilani asked. Vorath looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, humans were living in buildings that were slowly falling apart around them. Not because of any defect, but because they were simply too alive for structures designed for species that had forgotten how to move. I am going to learn how they build on Earth, Vorath said. I am going to study their flexible joints and shock absorbers and self-healing materials. And then, I am going to create something new. Something that has never existed in the galaxy before. Tilani tilted her head. What is that? A building designed for life, Vorath said. A structure that moves with its inhabitants, instead of against them. A place where humans can run and jump and dance without bringing the walls down around them. He turned to face the young engineer who had changed his understanding of the universe. Will you help me build it? Tilani's silver eyes lit up. It would be my honor. On Keller 7, Jack received word that the council had rejected Sereth's proposal for human restrictions. Claire called him with the news, her voice bright with relief. Tilani's presentation changed everything, she said. They are not just accepting us anymore. They are curious about us. They want to understand how we do what we do. Jack smiled for the first time in weeks. Then maybe some good came out of this mess after all. More than good, Claire said. Vorath is coming back. He has a proposal for a joint construction project. The first human Valanthe collaborative building. Jack thought about that. Human engineering combined with Valanthe materials. Earth-style flexibility built into galactic-grade construction. It could be the beginning of something entirely new. Tell him I am ready when he is, Jack said. Let us build something that lasts. 6 months had passed since the first building fell. Now a new structure stood at the heart of the colony, and thousands of humans and Valanthe had gathered to watch its dedication ceremony. The building was beautiful. It rose 15 stories into the sky, its surface shimmering with a combination of Valanthe materials and human design. But the real innovation was invisible to the eye. Hidden within the walls were flexible joints that could absorb vibration. The floors were layered with shock-absorbing materials that turned every footstep into a gentle wave instead of a harsh impact. The entire structure was designed to move, to flex, to breathe along with its inhabitants. They called it the Morrison-Vorath Center, named after the two engineers who had designed it together. Jack stood at the front of the crowd, feeling slightly embarrassed by all the attention. He had never wanted to be famous. He just wanted to solve problems. But Claire had insisted that this moment was important for both species. This is not just a building, she had told him. This is proof that humans and Valanthe can work together. That differences can be bridges instead of walls. Vorath stood beside Jack. His forearms folded in the Valanthe gesture of pride and accomplishment. The old architect had changed over the past 6 months. He smiled more now. He asked questions instead of making assumptions. He had even learned to appreciate human coffee, though he still thought it tasted like engine fuel. Are you ready? Jack asked him. Vorath looked at the building they had created together. I have been building structures for 200 years. I thought I knew everything there was to know about construction. Then I met humans, and I realized I had only learned half the lesson. What was the other half? That buildings are not just shelters, Vorath said. They are reflections of the species that live in them. My buildings were perfect for species that sit still. But humans do not sit still. You run, you jump, you dance, you play. You are constantly in motion, even when you are standing in place. A building for humans must be as alive as the humans inside it. The ceremony began. Counselor Sereth, who had once called for human restrictions, now delivered a speech about cooperation and understanding. He did not apologize for his earlier suspicions, but he acknowledged that he had been wrong. It was the closest thing to an apology that Valanthi culture allowed. Tilani spoke next. The young engineer had become something of a celebrity in the months since her presentation to the Galactic Council. She had published papers on human kinematics that were being studied across the galaxy. She had helped design the Morrison Vorath Center and was already planning future projects. When I first watched human children playing, she said to the crowd, I thought they were hurting themselves. I could not understand why they would throw their bodies around with such reckless energy. Now I understand that they were not being reckless. They were practicing, training, preparing themselves for a world that might shake or burn or flood at any moment. She looked at Sam Reeves, who stood in the audience with a proud smile on his face. They had become good friends during the investigation. He had taught her how to throw a baseball. She had taught him Valanthi meditation techniques. It was a fair trade. Humans call their restlessness a curse sometimes, Tilani continued. They wish they could sit still, focus longer, worry less. But I call it a gift. Their ancestors survived impossible conditions because they could not stop moving, and now that same energy has spread to the stars. Humans do not just live in places. They transform them. They fill them with motion and noise and life. The crowd applauded. Jack noticed that even some of the Valanthi were clapping, though they did so much more quietly than the humans. Finally, it was time to open the building. Jack and Vorath walked to the main entrance together and pressed their hands against the sensor panel. The doors slid open, and the crowd streamed inside. The building came alive with human energy. Children immediately began running through the halls. Adults explored the different rooms, their footsteps creating vibrations that rippled through the shock-absorbing floors. Someone found the gymnasium and started a game of basketball. Someone else discovered the dance hall and turned on music. Vorath stood in the middle of the main lobby and watched it all happen. He placed one of his 4 hands against the wall and felt the building respond. It was not fighting against the human movement. It was flowing with it, absorbing it, turning chaos into harmony. Ben Torres walked up beside him. The old construction foreman had been supervising the final stages of construction, sharing decades of earth-building knowledge with the Valanthi workers. Not bad, Ben said, looking around. Reminds me of buildings back home. They used to say that a good building has soul. It moves with you instead of against you. I understand that now, Vorath said. All my life, I built monuments. Structures designed to stand unchanged for millennia. But humans do not want monuments. They want homes. Places that feel alive. Jack joined them, slightly out of breath from the celebration. The structural sensors are showing perfect response. The building is handling the load exactly as we designed, Vorath nodded. This is only the beginning. Other species are already asking for similar designs. Worlds with difficult geology. Colonies on unstable moons. Places where traditional construction has always failed. Human-style buildings for the whole galaxy, Jack said with a smile. Never thought I would see that. Neither did I, Vorath admitted. But humans have a way of changing what is possible. Claire appeared at Jack's side. She was glowing with satisfaction. The ambassador program has been approved. Humanity will have a permanent representative on the Galactic Council, and the first motion we are proposing is a joint exploration initiative. Human and Valanthi teams, together, exploring worlds that have been abandoned or avoided. Worlds where the ground shakes, Jack said. Worlds where only humans know how to survive, Claire replied. As the evening continued, the building filled with the sounds of human life. Laughter, music, footsteps, arguments, celebrations, all the noise and chaos that Valanthi construction had never been designed to handle. Vorath walked outside and looked up at the structure he had helped create. The walls pulsed gently with the vibration of hundreds of people living their lives inside. It was nothing like his old buildings, those silent monuments that stood unchanged for centuries. It was better. Jack found him there a few minutes later. You know, Jack said, when that first building fell, I thought it might be the end of humanity's place in the galaxy. I thought they would blame us, reject us, send us back to Earth. I considered recommending that outcome, Vorath admitted. Your people seemed dangerous, destructive, incompatible with everything we had built. What changed your mind? Vorath looked at the stars above them. Countless worlds, countless possibilities, and now, countless new partnerships waiting to be formed. I realized that the galaxy is not a museum, he said. It is not meant to stay the same forever. It is meant to grow, to change, to be filled with life. He turned to face Jack. Your people bring life wherever you go. Noisy, chaotic, exhausting life. And that is exactly what the galaxy needs. Jack smiled. So we are not too much trouble? Vorath laughed. It was a strange sound, coming from a Valanthi, but it was genuine. You are absolutely too much trouble, he said, but you are worth it. Above them, the Morrison-Vorath Center hummed with energy. Inside, humans danced and ran and played and lived, and for the first time in galactic history, the building danced with them.